slowly start to ease us in here. Thanks, everybody. I'll repeat myself in a minute, but for those that are on and have joined us, thank you so much. Very excited here. Another great panel from InsurTech Denver. I do want to spend a minute talking about the LinkedIn page. We've got more and more folks following the corporate page, and we have the group page as well, but we're slowly but steadily moving everything over to the corporate page. So just a note there. Thanks everybody for following that page. We are trying to triple the number of followers if we can this year. So be liberal, please, in inviting other folks to follow the LinkedIn page. Obviously, the InsurTech Denver community is growing. It seems like by the day, and it seems like I'm posting another round that's being raised by companies here every week or every month at least. Very exciting times. And so thank you so much again for joining us here. We've got a wonderful panel today. I'll let Mark, who's going to host, take over. He's the moderator in just a minute. The other housekeeping items are, of course, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll have a Q&A session at the end at 4:35. We try to finish promptly at 4:45. Of course, if there are any questions that we don't get to, please follow up with me. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mark.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Really appreciate it. And I'll extend my welcome to everyone as well. I'm Mark Wheeler, and I'll be acting as a moderator today and Daniel's cohort on putting together this group for us. We have a great panel today. I think the subject matter is pretty timely, and that is building teams and hiring great people, talent, diversity, and potential. And I think coming out of the environment that we've been in as we hopefully head out of COVID, hiring has been, I think a challenge in some ways. We'll talk about that. And I just think this idea of working remotely has been a challenge around hiring and building a team as well. So those are the topics we want to try and touch on this afternoon. And to begin with, I'd like to have each one of the panelists take and introduce themselves. And we'll start with Lucy, and then we'll go to Jay and Melissa, and we'll kick off that way.
Great.
Lucy, you're on.
Thanks, Mark, and excited to be on the panel. I'm a big supporter of InsurTech Denver. Would you like the introduction, just a personal one, or the company, or both? Just double check.
Let's look at the company you're with and what your company does.
Great. So Flyreel is a Denver-based InsurTech that's focused on the P&C market. And what we do is we equip insurance providers with an advanced AI solution for residential and commercial. And really what that does is it allows our customers, the carriers, to automate and improve the outcomes for their customers, the policyholder, while also driving business performance. And we do this by providing ground level truth about properties and putting that power of the data collection in the hands of insurers.
Very good. And you guys have been active as well. You've had hiring and dollars and all kinds of good things.
We have. We were excited. We closed our Series A round. I think it was in the November timeframe. And since then, we've been on a hiring spree and probably about doubled our team. So brought on 20-25 hires in the last couple months. So I have a lot of good insights.
Yeah, congratulations on that. Jay, why don't you fill us in?
Excellent. Hey, everyone. My name is Jay Zasheen. I run technology and product at a company locally called Highwing. We are an InsurTech, obviously, focused on the relationship between brokers and carriers in the middle market commercial insurance space. Our goal is to provide what we call the first open data platform for commercial insurance. So we're aiming to really sort of help create that highway between brokers and carriers in middle market and large commercial, and take that transaction process and sort of turbocharge it with data. So our company is currently 16 people. We're relatively small, but we're in rapid growth mode. So lots of interesting stories from growth and expansion on the hiring front for the last few months, and lots more in our future.
Great. Look forward to those insights. And Melissa.
Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Eaton. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at Pi Insurance, and Pi, another InsurTech out of the Denver and DC markets. We work with small businesses using technology and innovation to improve how they access insurance. So right now we're focused on workers' compensation directly to small businesses, and we are also looking to expand and grow that and add services in 2021. So very excited. We just closed our Series C. So we have a total of over 300 million in the bank, which is wonderful. And to Lucy and Jay's point, we're always scaling and growing, which is just fantastic for the Denver market as well as for all of us. You know, I think it's collectively great success when we see each other really thriving, and the needs and opportunities are there. So we have doubled our team during the pandemic, and we are now at over 270 people. So
Congratulations. Well, we'll have to hear more about how you're able to double your team in a remote environment. So the first question I have, Jay, we'll target this to you. And is when you think about, you know, the challenges that you face in hiring, and this year or last year, if you want to think about it, was pretty unique. We have the Denver marketplace, which is growing, and I'm sure talent is hard to find. Number two, we had a COVID environment, and three, just being part of a startup in that kind of environment, it adds another layer to it. So share with us a bit about some of the challenges that you've seen in trying to find and hire great talent.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the biggest change we've seen in call it the last, 13, 14 months has been, COVID has basically overnight, and certainly over the course of that period of time, taken the talent market from being sort of frequently local and regional to effectively global. And I think there's still a lot that remains to be seen in terms of what that means for salaries, for accessing talent, for recruiting, sort of all of those things. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see where all of that goes in the coming months and sort of where all of that nets out. I don't, what we've seen a lot is that having a lot of predictability in your hiring process is really challenging right now because you don't necessarily know who you're going to be up against. You may be going up against companies that are the same size that you are, against much larger companies, ones that are at different stages, at different funding rounds, have sort of different values and different things that they're looking to accomplish. So figuring out that balance and being able to sort of hire efficiently, given all of those factors, is super complicated. And then I think the one other thing that I would layer on top of that is InsurTech in particular, I think is in a really interesting niche from a talent access perspective, because you sort of sit at the nexus of startup talent, tech talent, and then experienced insurance talent, and all of those are sort of relatively specific skill sets. So very frequently you're sort of competing in a very specific talent or pool of talent for a lot of the roles that you're looking to hire for. So on one hand, I think that the remote side has actually been a boon for that. You have a talent market that's very small, and expanding the scope of that to national really opens a lot of doors. But it does mean that you're now competing with everyone sort of across the country or across the globe for that same set of folks. So figuring out how to really be able to take advantage of that and sort of access that efficiently is I think one of the biggest challenges for companies moving forward, and certainly something that we've seen.
Thank you for that. And Melissa, what have you seen? You talked about this huge growth that you had experience with this past year in hiring. Tell us more about what you were seeing.
Yeah, one of the things that I think Jay said is that, you've opened up the doors to this amazing landscape of employees that are available. But at the same time, that also means there's a lot more competition. So you're also seeing that people, I think, one of the things I tell my team, and I mean this dearly, is that if you haven't learned something through the pandemic and what 2020 brought to us, which is so many different things, including the pandemic and BLM and just, murder hornets, I don't know, but all of those things included. And if you haven't taken a moment to do some self-reflection and figure out what it is that's important to you, you've really lost the point of 2020 in my mind. And I think as companies and as employers, we have to be very intentional about how we want to grow our team. And so when you're looking at this amazing candidate pool that's very rich, you also need to think about what is it that you need as a company to grow and scale. And like Jay said, it's competitive because we're all looking for pretty much the same types of competencies. So.
And how about you, Lucy? What have you seen?
Yeah, I would say that we have always, with our engineering talent, done a remote model. So moving that way has not been challenging for us. Because completely agree that COVID exposed what we had been experiencing before. When you open it up to a nationwide, you get incredible sense, incredible great group of folks. I got to be honest, we haven't had a lot of challenges. We are beyond engineering and our sales. We look for Denver first and the other roles, and Denver has been a really, really rich market. And we've had a backlog of candidates that are interested in it. One of the things that we have really challenged ourselves is, and I think we're getting to a little bit, is that diversity and being deliberate about the type of people that we want to hire. We think about diversity in probably similar, to Jay and Melissa, but in a broader sense. It's really about the backgrounds and the experience and perspectives, because diversity is about when you bring those different perspectives and different points of view, you get a great culture, a great company, and a great product. That's what we're really looking for. So that adds a layer of complexity, but certainly very doable. But to put that as, it's actually one of our core values in hiring that we really, really push. We've done really well on the traditional metrics. One of the things that we're challenged with, but I think is a little bit of an industry challenge, is gender diversity in the engineering team. Even opening up nationwide, that's still a challenge. And so we've been really deliberate about different activities and approaches, from just being, forward in our external communication, internal communication, to Women Who Hack last week. We're there and we got some great candidates last year, and we have a great pipeline. So that's one of the challenges. I'm not sure it's COVID specific, but one of the things that we have top of our mind as we expand our team.
Yeah, I think within the overall insurance industry, there's been a lot of conversation within the industry and then outside the industry as well about diversity, and really what does that mean and the value that it adds to an organization around that. So I'd be curious, Jay, as you look at your team, I mean, is there a purposeful approach to diversity? And, thinking about it in its broadest term, as you look at hiring, and, I would guess remote perhaps has helped that, made it easier. But tell us more about how you guys are thinking about how you've approached it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting the way that we've tried to put a lot of thought into how we've assembled our team and our culture at Highwing. This is my several startups in. I've sort of lost track of the number, but done the team building thing a few times. And I think one of the things that's really stuck with me from several times through this particular rodeo is knowing that you have to be super deliberate about the values and the culture that you set up front, because those things stick. And sometimes the things that you don't intend to have stick are the ones that actually do stick. So you sort of have to be extra intentional about the pieces that you feel like are sort of highly positive values initially, and also sort of select against the things that you really don't want to have within the team. And I think that sort of inertia is one of the reasons why the sort of classic early startup team lack of diversity thing that happens is that you have folks who are hiring the folks that they've worked with in the past, and not necessarily making an active effort to expand the network. So there's no sort of active selection against getting a more diverse talent pool, but there's also not that effort to really expand it. And that's really the only way that changes, is if you're constantly pushing outside of the familiar networks and those consistent four walls that you're sort of used to networking within, and focusing on how to expand that pool of talent. There are, I would say, two big things that have played into it for us. One, to sort of harken back to that initial point, candidly, the talent pool in folks that we know and like to work with and have worked with before is relatively small, and it's super competitive. So the only way that we're going to continue to be able to attract the amount of talent that we need to grow at the pace that we want to grow is by continually expanding that network and trying to find more and new people, because if we keep fishing in a relatively small pond, that's not a good recipe for us to achieve the outcomes that we want to achieve.
Sure.
The other piece I would say that's been maybe even more important is we want to make sure that we're continuing to invest in people at all levels, and that's been a really sort of big differentiator for us. We know that if we continue to expand our talent pool, but we're only sort of looking in very specific areas, that doesn't sort of grow it dramatically as quickly as we would like to. But an area where we can make a meaningful difference is starting to say, hey, let's let's figure out how we can bring on folks across a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences and things like that. And sort of regardless of what that looks like, we want to make sure that we're investing in them and making them really successful and letting them,
Sure.
or making sure that they have the tools and support that they need to grow at Highwing. And that's, it takes a little bit of a longer view of talent. And I think that it can be hard to do for an early stage company, but I think that's a thing that's super important. And it's I think a really powerful way to really own your destiny as far as talent acquisition and growth goes is putting your stake in the ground immediately and say, hey, we're going to invest in people for the long term and really sort of focus on not only how do we hire from different talent pools, but how do we build a really good program for growing folks as well.
Right. Very good. And Melissa, how about from your side? What have you folks been doing?
To be honest, I think we have been growing so quickly that one of the things that we've recognized is we haven't done a great job of being as intentional and purposeful towards this goal. And you end up in a place where we are at, where we're like, oh my gosh, this is skewed way off the wrong end. So I think that Jay said it well, but I would say, put your money where your mouth is,
Yep.
right? We all talk the talk, and no one is saying, I don't want a diverse workforce. I don't want a diverse group of employees. Nobody is saying that. But saying it and doing something about it is something very different. So, that's the challenge that we face as the leaders at Pi. And we are doing the same things that Jay and Lucy are doing and trying to broaden the scope of the pool and looking in new ways. But I think part of it is also having confidence and trusting potential. So one of the things that if you think about especially for, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, but like when you're talking about leadership, when you're talking about engineers, for example, there's a reason why the pool is smaller, because there's less opportunity. And so when you're looking as a startup, you only have so many positions that you can actually fill. And those are roles that are very, very crucial to your success. So you're always going to look for the best person. And sometimes we kind of forget that the best person is not always necessarily the person that's done it already, but it's somebody that has the drive, has the initiative, self-initiative, and has, a diverse way of looking at something and can bring something to the table. So I think that's a challenge for us in a very, fintech is a very old school framework, antiquated processes kind of way of doing things. And so we've got to look outside of what we feel comfortable with and kind of move into the uncomfortable. So
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the thing that I hear is, being very purposeful in the hiring and conscious of what you're doing to try and build out that team around that. Let me ask kind of an ancillary question that I know I've run into, and that is insurance, not necessarily at the high top of one's list, a thing about an industry to go into. I think particularly when you think of, technology and engineering, and that it may not be there. So I'd be curious. Yeah, exactly. Right. So I'd be curious as to kind of what an experience or how you've overcome some of those issues, or if it's even been an issue for you, in your hiring practices. And, that person has, I don't know, Amazon versus InsurTech. Ooh, I don't know. Right.
Yeah.
So Jay, how have you guys faced that? Have you run into that issue at all, and how have you addressed it?
We do actually. I think probably more hires than not. That's definitely a question that comes up. I'm a firm believer that one of the greatest things that you can offer as an employer, particularly within the product and engineering realm, although I think it applies to others as well, is the ability for someone to have meaningful impact, right? And actually see their work get used by folks and get that feedback loop of building something, having people use it, having people get value out of it, and using that to sort of do that cycle over again and really sort of have someone value the thing that you're doing. And I think that is a fairly unique opportunity within the insurance space. It's a very rich problem domain. There are so many things that you can do from a problem space that are massive challenges that people face all day, every day in what they're doing with workflows, with tools, with any number of parts of the insurance value chain. And so one area that we have been really successful in talking to folks about is we'll be upfront and say that this is not necessarily a mission-driven business, and if that's really sort of what you're focused on, then this may not be the best fit. But if you want to have a lot of impact and have the work that you're doing be used and be valued by a lot of different people, then we see a lot of potential for that. That's definitely, I think, a really strong message for folks, particularly coming from a lot of things in the consumer sector or sort of a lot of traditional technology heavy companies that may not have that level of depth or that level of usage or even the sort of rewarding quality to that work. I think that's something that we can really offer uniquely within insurance.
Yeah, I mean, I would really agree with that. I think from a technology perspective, what we're offering is the ability to see the impact of your work quickly. We have an incredible engineering team. And then if you look at our AI team, we have some really national talent there. And where we got them is instead of doing those theoretical models and hoping they work, that they get to see them in the wild with customers, hear that feedback from us on a weekly basis about what the impact of the model has been doing for them. So while the industry might not be exciting at first blush, the ability to have that impact quickly realized and that feedback loop gets the engineers excited.
Okay.
Yeah,
How about
and
you, Melissa?
I was going to say, I think I've been in insurance too long because I have another spin on how noble a cause insurance is. And really for Pi, I really do believe this, that, we are in charge. Well, my team, for example, is in charge of some undeniable moments of truth for our customers, right? So for small business owners, this is a big deal. All of us probably know someone who's a small business owner if you haven't been one yourself. And as you know, small business owners have a dream. They put their heart and soul into it. And so workers' comp insurance protects their injured workers, gets them back to work. And that could be their brother, girlfriend, boyfriend, neighbor. And those are critical times. And so we're taking care of them. And that is a noble cause. And to your point around the products that we are delivering and the services we're providing, being part of a startup, I think that's the sexy part of it for a lot of these people. And you can actually have, if you join Pi, a piece of the pie. So you have ownership, you have equity, and you actually have the ability to influence and contribute and add value. And I think, Jay and Lucy said it well, like that is really kind of what you have to drive home in those interviews, because I think the biggest, probably for all of us, around competencies that are important when we're looking for great employees is ownership, right? You want them to own what they do, their work, there's integrity in that. And so I think ownership, urgency, delivering results, that's what's really important in a startup. And that's what we can sell them as the differentiator compared to LinkedIn, Google. I mean, not that they're not doing cool things there, but you're part of the bureaucracy.
Yeah, I mean, I think insurtech still, we've been talking about it for a while, but it's still a relatively new industry. And so where there's a lot of problems, and as Jay was saying, problems and challenges to solve. And that's what I say. I'm not a veteran there. I've been in this industry about 3-4 years, but when I first looked at it, I was like, oh gosh, this is not interesting. But when you start unpacking it, it's fascinating. And this is a fascinating time to be into it. And that's what we talk to candidates about.
Yeah.
There's a really fundamental shift that is happening in the insurance industry. And a lot of it's tech driven. And this is a chance to really change the paradigm that's been in operation for 150 years So I do think it's reframing this. I actually tell now when I mentor a lot of folks in the beginning of their career, I'm like, I would definitely think of insurance as an industry to jump into if I was their age, which if you would have told me that at 20 years ago, I would have said, no way, no how.
Well, I think it's an extremely exciting industry to be in, particularly today. There's so much innovation that's going on that's so needed within the industry. There are dollars being spent. Billions of dollars, just in Denver alone. We've seen the number of investments that have come in, companies moving here from the industry and all of that. So I think it's a great time. And to all of your points, if you want to make an impact, I think this is an industry that you can do that. So let me take the question down even narrower. So, and Lucy, I'm going to ask you this first. So when you're looking and hiring folks, are there 2, 3 characteristics that you must check the box on
Yeah.
for those individuals to be part of the team and to really fit in culture and add value in that? And if there are, what would those be?
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
you want me to go? I'll go first. How's that?
All right, you can go first and then Lucy, you'll come back.
I'm sorry. I was like, so for us, we call our team members pioneers. There's a lot of pieism. Sorry, you guys. Pioneers. And we're always looking for what's going to make them most successful. And I mentioned some of them. So really it's around 3 basic competencies around drive. And in drive, I talk about initiative, grit, flexibility, ownership. Those are the things that we look for specifically in drive. Resourcefulness. And I think this had more meaning during COVID than anything else, because besides experience and what they're bringing to the table, they have to have an ability to problem solve on their own, ask the right kind of questions, continual learning, and really be able to really be a great PI, in whatever world they're living in, find opportunities for us to do better and anticipate some of the issues that we may face. And then the last one that I think is what we all want in teammates and colleagues, leaders, is relatability. And I mean that by connecting, collaborating, communicating well, self-awareness. And I think all of us would admit a great sense of humor helps. That's really helpful in these kinds of times. So those are the things that we specifically look for, and we really look to make sure that we can find members that could be additive to PI, not necessarily just a good fit, if that makes sense. We'd all like to learn from other people. So.
And how about you, Lucy?
yeah, I think, the biggest thing we look for is culture. I mean, if it's between a cultural fit and a technical fit, and they're great technical and it doesn't fit our culture, it's a no. And I have to we have a great Emily in our team, and she's kind of summed up how we think about Flywheel. We don't call her, well, sometimes we call ourselves Flywheelers, but it's a group of sharp-minded and kind-hearted people that don't take themselves very seriously, but take work very seriously. And so when we're trying to bring that culture to reality when we're hiring, we actually have 3 kind of stated values that we look for is diversity. We want to think about this person in the context, are they bringing different perspectives in that, whether it's an engineer, customer success, product, do they have different perspective, different set of experience that's going to be additive to the team, like what Melissa was saying. The other one is fly real first. We all have our specific roles, right? But we have to work towards the common good of Flywheel. So that becomes super critical. And we're really trying to suss that out in the interview. And the third one is collaboration, which is really closely related to that. We need people that want to and can operate in a collaborative team within their own teams, but across the teams to support that Flywheel first mentality.
Got it. Very good. Thank you for that. It sparked an idea that I'll come back to. So Jay, what do you have over at your shop?
Yeah, I think our single biggest sort of through line is that we're really strong believers that building software products is a team sport, and it's you're not gonna get there by yourself, even through heroic efforts. So we want to find folks who are first and foremost really invested in not just their own individual performance or what they're doing themselves, but in the performance of the team, in the health of the team, and the success of the team. So we really look for folks who are low ego team players and interested in being really invested in the success of those around them. And that's had some really interesting knock-on effects. We have a handful of values that we evaluate folks against that are collaboration, autonomy, continuous improvement, kindness, which doesn't necessarily mean just being positive. It means having those hard conversations when you need to have them. But they really all come back to that idea of being a really good teammate first, and really being focused on how do we make the team successful, and how do we ultimately get where we're going together as a group.
Sure. Let me come back to a question, and Lucy, I'll have you lead with this. When you're looking at hiring, are you hiring for today, or are you hiring for the potential for tomorrow?
So, I was thinking about this as we were answering questions. It's really interesting how you put together the panel, and I'm sure it was deliberate knowing you, Mark, but you have 3 different stages of startup here. We're at about almost 50, Jay's about 15 to 20, and Melissa's at 200. So we're in that transition where, when you're first, I think Melissa made that point, when we're first hiring, when you have 5 or 6 people, or Jay made that point, you're very deliberate. You got to hire that person that's going to do it. As we make that transition and we really are being deliberate about expressing our values in our hiring, it's a lot about potential, people that can do the job today, but also are going to grow and morph with us. Again, folks that are in the startup mode know that the company and what you need almost changes every 6 to 12 months when you hit those pivots. And so we really need those folks with the growth potential. So great question, but definitely for tomorrow, look for that higher potential.
And how about you, Melissa?
We definitely have started that pivot. As Lucy mentioned, I think I mentioned this early on, we were definitely trying just to tread water and make sure everything was happening. And when I started, I didn't have a team. And so, hiring a team, and now I have 50. It's been very interesting. I just had a conversation with my director, one of my directors, and I said, we need to really evaluate our resource plan for 2021, because we are going to be much more intentional about hiring for the roles that we know we need to continue to grow and scale. And I don't mean that by adding people. I mean, like, the company, and to get us to that place, and how do we become the best versions and the best in class that we want to be. And that might mean, instead of hiring, 5 new sales reps, we need to hire one very specific sales ops analyst to use data to inform us how to work more efficiently. So those are the kinds of conversations we're having today. And definitely I would agree with Lucy that it's so important. And that's one of the things I mentioned about diversity and gender equity, is thinking about the potential of how this person can grow and be really additive to the entire culture, into the success of your company. I think that's really the most important thing for me right now, personally.
And Jay, for you, being kind of the younger of the companies, how do you see it?
Yeah, so I'll throw another another split that I see in the way that we think about talent sort of into the mix. So I think when you're first starting out, you necessarily have a much greater need for generalists that starts to evolve into a need for specialists as the company gets bigger, and you start to get to a place where you have sort of deeper focus in certain areas, and folks really sort of have to start to sort into the areas where they're going to be for the long term. So for us, there's sort of an interesting mix. We're sort of just starting that transition now, and that generalist to specialist thing, I think, is a really interesting place to be from a hiring perspective. At the end of the day, I think pretty much any tech company, but particularly at our stage, we're hiring folks who are going to be working on problems that are relatively vague, still require a lot of definition, still have a lot of unknowns in them. So to a certain extent, it's really necessary to find folks or to evaluate folks based on potential as they're coming in, because we haven't solved the problems that we're going to ask them to solve before, and they almost certainly haven't either. So figuring out folks who really sort of thrive on that level of definition or lack thereof, and are sort of interested in doing that's super important, and we really sort of have to look at potential there, because there's not a really strong established path that we're able to access. The only corollary I would add there is that I think as you start to grow, and as you start to bring on more folks and make sure that they are able to meet their career goals at your company, flipping the way that you evaluate folks to make sure that it's super focused on the work that they're doing and where they're actually contributing, is a really key part of not only sort of attracting talent but growing and developing talent. And then that's I think a place where things can sometimes get a little bit tricky, but making sure that you're evaluating based on what people are doing and not on the potential that you see in them, is sort of a really critical part of actually growing people fairly and building an organization that supports folks of all backgrounds.
Yeah, I think you touched on an issue that, Melissa, you and I chatted about earlier in the week, and that is, as your company evolves, as your needs change, people that you brought in early, who were the mavericks, who were the rule breakers, who were all of those things, may or may not fit in the culture. it may actually be an impediment, or there's a different defined role, or the role suddenly has shrunk a bit because you need them to focus more on what they're doing. So I'd be curious, Lucy, and then we'll go to Melissa. Have you encountered that yet? And if you have, how have you tried to address it?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. We try to do our best in hiring, but there's some folks that, as we've grown, haven't been able to stay within our values. And usually it's around, Jay said, is software is a team sport, or product development's a team sport. It's been around the collaboration. And so sometimes, it's like anything in any industry. As you work with people, you try to let them know what the expectations are, and you try to give them that feedback. But I think you bring an interesting point is as you grow and scale, and that I think it was Jay or Mark, you were saying that you have the mavericks or the people that can do everything, and then you need specialized. And that's a point we are in right now. And, I feel confident in the leadership that we have and the team that we have, that they're going to grow. But there might be some people that prefer to be in a different environment, and we'll support them if they want to make different choices. I met someone in my early days of networking that says fractional CFO, and he's like, I hate working with companies when they get over like 20. And he knew that about himself, and there's some folks that really love that kind of cowboy Wild West environment. But again, I think to the earlier question, we're looking for people that can play, and Melissa's point about that problem solving, the fungible, being at a startup, whether it's a 5-person, 20 or 200, requires that creativity. You don't always have the resources you want, but it also requires flexibility. So we're trying to look for that, and we've been relatively successful, but I'm sure there's going to be some challenges along the way.
Sure. And Melissa, you're further along, so maybe you've gone through this bumpy road already. But if you're looking in the rearview mirror, what did you see?
I think it was somewhat what everybody calls it. It's true, growing pains, because it's painful. It's painful to see people who are extremely bright, extremely dedicated, extremely motivated, and have helped to build a framework or a platform, or, build an engineering team or whatever it has been. And to see the struggle as the company has grown and is more successful, and to see somewhat it's like you're taming a wild horse or something, right? You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden they're like, wait, I liked it when I was the one that made every decision, and I didn't have to go back to a product team. We didn't have product, right? I didn't have to follow up about this roadmap thing. I could just make a change and throw it in the system overnight, and in the morning nobody really cared because I did it. Well, we're too big for that now. You can't do that. And so for me, it's been painful because I could kind of see it before it even happened, just knowing that, because I had worked with this person actually at a previous company too. And for me, that was personally painful to see that happening, because their role kind of get shifted further and further, like almost smaller. And I think, like I said, I think there are really great people that, the fractional CFO, I think there are people that enjoy that component of it, of building from ground zero. But then once it gets to something like where we are today, they're like, oh, no, I'm not into that. So you have to respect where people are, but you have to have hard conversations and say, hey, what I want is best for Pi, but I also want what's best for you. And it just doesn't feel like it's working for you.
Yeah, I think we've all had those hard conversations, or to your point, that you see it happening and you hope you could avoid it. But unfortunately, sometimes you just can't. Let me shift gears just a little bit and ask a very practical, technical question. And that is, I don't know how familiar everyone is with the equal work, equal pay law in Colorado. And if you've run into that, and kind of what your experience has been, and how you're trying to manage it when we talk about culture, when we talk about all of these things that are going on. Melissa, I'm going to start with you because I know we touched base on this. If you have a comment on that you can share with the group.
It's very interesting that you brought that up, because I just had meeting with the people team about that this morning. So, and I've also had some meetings with some employees about it. It's been very eye-opening. They appreciate the transparency. You know, the job salary ranges are posted. We have to post everything internally, minimally, even if it's just a promotion. If it is a promotion, allowing that opportunity. I had a product person contact me yesterday and said she needed 5 minutes of my time to talk about this. I said, okay. And she said, you know, I thought I was doing pretty well. And then I saw them post my role or my the level above me role, and I saw what the salary range was, and I realized, whoa, wait a minute, right? And that is going to be a challenge for us as a company to answer those questions. And I think it's good. I think it's good. It's good for us. It's good for us to get internal alignment, equitable alignment. We have to get on the same page with our people team, our compensation team, with the execs and all of the leaders, because we're all approaching it. It's a new thing for us, and we're all approaching it differently. Some of us have been at larger companies where we've had to deal with this already, because I was in California, so we already had to deal with this. But that doesn't mean it's easier. I think it's a great thing, but how you actually implement it and how you have those tough conversations is really going to be important, because I don't want to diminish or make anyone feel less in their role they're currently in.
Well, Jay, it looks like you were shaking your head and like, oh yeah, we're on this right now. So tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I think there have been two really interesting, I think, impacts from this. One, in a lot of ways, it does sort of put us in the same boat as a lot of other municipalities or states or wherever have already been. That similar laws have been on the books in other places, and I think there's an interesting dovetailing of the start of or this law going into effect in Colorado with that globalization of the talent market that just sort of accelerates an existing thing that was already sort of a direction that a lot of companies were having to head, and maybe just sort of brought that home sooner. Specifically for us, I would say it's forced us to have a lot of really sort of healthy conversations and formalizing systems that I would say historically companies our size wouldn't necessarily be thinking about, but I think are really key things for our employees to help support them and sort of give them better defined paths, structure for growth, things like that. We've put a lot of work or starting to put a lot more work into things like career ladders and setting expectations at different levels that reflect all the way back into our hiring and promotion process. And I think if you look back, even a couple of years, not a lot of 16-person companies would be putting a lot of thought into that, and it's really a critical part of what we're doing to enable our people and enable our hiring operations moving forward. And so I think the companies that can really sort of focus on that and turn that from something that's an obligation into a strength and really sort of show that as a way to put the needs of your people and the progression of folks that are working for your company front and center, and using that as a toolkit to enable employees to really sort of plot out their career and envision themselves at the company for the long term. That's a huge asset. So if you can sort of take this from something that certainly creates some challenges, but also creates a huge amount of opportunities, I think there's a tremendous amount of value there, and I think that's something that a lot of startups are sort of uniquely capable of doing, which is very cool.
Very much so. Hey, and Lucy, how about you? We can wrap up with your comments. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I'd say building on Jay's, I think we look at this as an opportunity. Kind of going back to something about this, diversity has been one of our values. And I think, Jay, we're very much like you, even though small. I remember having these conversations when there was 4 or 5 of us in the room about how, as we're building this company, diversity was going to be really important for us to build a great culture, great product in that. So we embrace this. I mean, we look at ours right now. We have 25% of our C-suite are women. I forgot to say I'm the chief revenue officer, and 50% of our VP levels are women. And that's been by design and continuing to play that out. But I do think it's a again, by deliberate, making sure when you are hiring and making sure when you're making those promotion opportunities that you're looking at a diverse slate and when you're looking at salary. So excited about that opportunity.
Great. Well, I think this whole question with regard to equity is something that's going to stay with us. And I think we as growing companies, being part of Denver, being part of the ecosystem here in building and wanting to not only be leaders in that, but leaders within our own industries, which is insurance. And that's going to be really important for us that we keep that very conscious and in front of us. And with that, we're a minute over, so I apologize. But I thank each one of our panel members for today. I think we had a great conversation. I hope those that were able to attend, found value in the sharing that was here of three great leaders for their companies and moving the industry ahead and each one of the companies ahead as well. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it and look forward to our next event, and we'll get news out on that shortly. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.